Quack, quack. That might be the new chant and call from Steeler fans as we might be approaching a Duck Dynasty in Pittsburgh. This is another edition of Mic Drop here on Pittsburgh Sports Live. This one a Steelers live chat edition of Mic Drop, so another one of those. I am your host, Mike Asti, and thanks to our sponsors behind me, the signs behind me, and everybody else that sponsors the entire family of networks, but in particular here, Beaver County Auto, and of course, SteelersNow.com. And as I bring the mic up to eye level, the Steelers may not be winning. They may not be winning, but they certainly still find a way to generate news. They never fail to generate news, and yes, they've had tons of drama the last few years, and this isn't to the level of Antonio Brown, who's still looking to get back in the league and get back on the Patriots, or Le'Veon Bell, who got some money, even though not the Steelers contract, and now is doing it with the Jets. But this is more of just poor play and bad luck for Pittsburgh. So I kind of want to touch on a few things here during this broadcast in terms of the rumors circulating around the Pittsburgh Steelers, namely their head coach in Mike Tomlin and his future, whether that is in Pittsburgh or whether that's in Washington, D.C., or actually Maryland, technically, in terms of where their home games are played, but whether or not he'll be the future head coach of the Washington Redskins, as that was a rumor that was percolating throughout the week. And the injuries the Steelers are dealing with, that it's not just Mason Rudolph, but it's an injury bug now that is affecting the entire roster, and Devlin Hodges, and how he'll actually do as the Steelers quarterback, if that's the case, but how this Steelers team can rally around their duck collar, but also where this team can go from here, because it's 1-4. It's a 1-4 football team. How they got there and where they can go, and kind of evaluating that 1-4 situation. And as I said, the Steelers team is 1-4, and they lose to the Baltimore Ravens. But I will make this clear, and I'm not usually an optimist by any means. I tell it like it is for those who don't know me, who are new to me. But I tell it like it is, whether it's good, bad, or ugly. I'll tell it like it is. This Steelers team might actually be one of the better 1-4 football teams we've ever had in the National Football League, as weird as that is to say. In terms of this Steelers team, yes, they're 1-4, and yes, that's unacceptable, and yes, that's bad, and yes, that's just 1-4. Mike Tomlin actually answered the questions about the Redskins rumors, kind of saying that, hey, he didn't get rid of it, and I'll get there later, but, hey, I'm currently the head coach of a 1-4 football team. I got to focus on this right now. And yes, that opens up the door for more rumors, and he didn't shut the door on the issue, which is interesting from somebody who's been around him a lot. That did not close that chapter or say that's ridiculous or asinine by any means. But they're 1-4 with a loss to the Patriots, Tom Brady, Bill Belichick, and yeah, that was before AB, but that was a team with Flash Gordon, who's been playing well, who wasn't there last year when they won the Super Bowl. But that's the defending Super Bowl champion Patriots. It's the greatest coach, greatest quarterback of all time. And they ran up and down on the Steelers like they've been doing to every other team in the National Football League this year. And that was with Big Ben there, but okay, you chalk that up to, you figure that would be the situation. You go to Seattle, and yes, Big Ben starts that game, doesn't finish it. So you have multiple games this year, Ravens, Seattle, where you don't leave with your starting quarterback. You enter the game with one guy, and you leave with another. It's impossible to win the National Football League when your starter gets hurt midway through a game. Maybe certain teams like the Colts this year can kind of stabilize the fort when you know you lost your original starter and you have a new guy that you're galvanizing the troops behind. I mean, it's rare in football history, but it can happen where Brady takes over for Bledsoe, becomes the greatest ever. They win the Super Bowl that year, or Kurt Warner takes over for Trent Green, who gets hurt in the preseason, wins the Super Bowl, eventually becomes a Hall of Famer. Those things can happen. They're not the norm. What's going on with Indy and Brissett after Luck retired, that's not the norm. But especially when you lose the guy midway through a game. You didn't plan ahead of time. You're changing course midway through that game. Happened twice to the Steelers. Alan and I talked about this at the press box on Sunday, that, I mean, You don't win those games when you lose your starter generally, and both times the Steelers were in those games, losing those games in close fashion. Baltimore, of course, in overtime. And then Seattle with some controversy mixed in there on the pass interference, added in off review after it originally wasn't there, helping Seattle. And you add the San Francisco game, which for me is by far the worst loss of these 4 losses, because that's a game in which you force 5 turnovers, something you couldn't do last year at all or the year before. You're failing to convert turnovers, and then you don't get points off those turnovers, only 6 points, 2 field goals after 5 turnovers, 4 of which were in the first half. That's impossible to rebound from. Okay, that's impossible to rebound from, and ridiculous and unacceptable. I get it. That's probably the toughest loss. But this is a team that's been in all of these games, that has faced several quality teams, plus losing their starter twice midway through those games, and their schedule the rest of this year is going to only get easier. They're going to be dealing with the Jets on the schedule, Miami Dolphins on Monday Night Football. Yes, the Chargers coming up, and they're coming off a loss, but they're a vulnerable team with Phillip Rivers and company. They probably are going to win that game at home. They beat the Steelers last year in Pittsburgh, but still, that's a winnable potential game, and even if you don't, then you're 1-5, and yes, you would figure that season's over. But again, winnable games the rest of the year. You're going to see Cleveland. You're going to see Cincinnati again. You're going to see Baltimore again. You're going to see the Jets. I mean, that's at least 4 more wins you would figure, even if you only split and you then beat the Ravens and you split with the Browns and you beat the Bengals because they suck. You beat the Dolphins because they suck. Nothing's guaranteed, but to winnable road. It's unlikely maybe to be a playoff team at 1-4, but how tough is the division, honestly? The Ravens probably are going to win this division at 9-7. Okay? They win that game. They win the win over the Steelers in the regular season, depending on what happens in the next matchup. That might be the situation. And that next matchup not too far here in the distant future. But it took overtime to beat a Steelers team who loses their starting quarterback that already was their backup quarterback midway through that game. And then I'll also get to in a moment on Juju's fumble, which aided them into winning. And Tomlin's decision to take the ball, or not to take the ball, but to take the ball and give it to his defense and not to take the ball first in overtime. A lot to unpack here, as some of you still, I see, get to the program. And feel free to chat with me. It happens every week. We usually get this chat, churning eventually. It maybe take a while. So feel free to interact there. Feel free to be a part of this. Feel free to ask questions or to engage. You can agree with me. You can disagree with me. No big deal. I'm a big boy. I can take it. But as this eventually happened, and I got to give daps to Alan there. I didn't see this until actually preparing for the show, but he threw up that up while we're sitting next to him in the press box. I didn't know, but Devlin Hodges leading the Steelers on a scoring drive. Quack, quack, because there's the Ducks, and there's Daffy Duck and leading the herd of ducks, and that's just a gem. Okay, that's a gem. It did well on Twitter, as you would expect, so I had to give it some love here on the broadcast. But Devlin Hodges did come in and play relatively well in terms of his first NFL action, and this is a guy without any hype. He did well in training camp, but no one heard of him prior to that, not even Steelers media, and nobody knew him nationally until second half this past week. Talking about Sanford University, not Stanford. I didn't say Stanford. So this is the guy who set a lot of records at his level of college football, but that's not exactly the equivalent D1 level of football. And a lot of question marks on whether he could get it done in the NFL. And he did okay, to say the least. So that'll also get to where you would go if he needs to be the future here that I'll get to in a moment. But it's a 1-4 football team with a relatively winnable schedule remaining in terms of winning some of those games. Say they might only finish 6-10. Maybe they finish 9-7. Nothing would really shock me with this Steelers season, honestly. I don't think more than 9-7 or 10-6 is going to be the Ravens' record. That probably wins the division. The Browns have clearly been vulnerable. They got embarrassed recently on Monday Night Football to the Niners. They lost to the Titans, who were an average football team. They got shellacked by the Niners. The Steelers should have beat San Fran. They forced 5 turnovers. That was a very close game. They kind of fumbled that game away with James Conner laying that on the ground. So that's I kind of just wanted to get that out there at the beginning as we churn through and get some shatters out there. This is a 1-4 football team, and that's unacceptable. And of course, that's unacceptable. But it's a 1-4 football team that is not exactly the worst 1-4 football team you've seen out there. Now, I do want to get at, in terms of the future of this team, and I'll get to Tomlin in a moment, but Devlin Hodges comes in for Mason Rudolph, and there are reports that Mason Rudolph, of course, he's at practice, he's throwing the football, he's mostly dealing with the second team, though. It certainly appears to be the Devlin Hodges show right now. But Mason Rudolph, who was in there, he was being efficient. There was criticism that he wasn't actually the coaching staff. They weren't giving him the reins enough. And I defended that. Many of my peers didn't go after this angle, but I was kind of maybe the Lone Ranger saying that, hey, that's not ridiculous. He is the backup quarterback. It is his first go as an NFL starter. He is young and inexperienced, and he did it in college, but that means nothing now. And Ben Roethlisberger, early in his career, yes, he led the Steelers to the AFC title game. Yes, he led the Steelers to a Super Bowl championship in his second year, but he was aided by a veteran team, a stellar defense, a team that was poised and ready and years of knocking on the door. And that certainly helped him. I mean, he finished that Super Bowl. They won in Super Bowl 40, but he had the worst quarterback rating for a Super Bowl winning quarterback ever. So it wasn't like he was lighting it up out there. And they let him game manage, so why wouldn't that happen with Rudolph? When Tom Brady, early in his career, he became the greatest of all time, and he had some solid numbers. But early on, when he first got the job, they were kind of tightening up the reins a little bit. They were having him game manage. He was helped by a great defense to win those early titles. It's not ridiculous to have that similar situation with Mason Rudolph. But regardless, he got hurt in the game. We know the Earl Thomas hit, which I also got some thoughts on. This is a jam-packed program here. Not much has happened. Alan texted me before. I don't know what you're going to talk about. Yeah, sarcastically so, because plenty to fill here. I could do two of these. And Devlin Hodges comes in. But then there's conversation, and I saw this from a colleague. Do you trade Artie Burns, who the Steelers have been wanting to trade forever, for Ryan Fitzpatrick? And I don't know why the Dolphins would do that, because Artie Burns isn't giving you much. He's been a disappointment. Maybe you'll try something. But he also could leave after the year. That seems like that's just my bad players for your good players. But it's also to the point that even if they'd want to do the deal, how does that make sense for the Steelers? In terms of, I defended the Minkah Fitzpatrick trade because that was when they were still a little better off record-wise, or at least they had longer of the season to go, even though they were winless. But he is filling a need. I get that would be the same with the quarterback position, but he also is going to be locked up for years to come. He's on a rookie deal. He wouldn't take you much against the cap. He's very, very young. His future is very, very bright. He's number one first-round, number one style draft pick, and he could serve as your first-round draft pick for next year, even though you would lose that because of the trade. So that would be your need anyway. He serves as the first-round pick. It's not really the end of the world. He's already having an impact on this defense anyway. But now at 1-4, and even though it's winnable, and even though I just went on to how they're 1-4, they're not that bad for 1-4. They have been unlucky. It's unacceptable, but the division's not been very, very good. The AFC North has been bad, and the door is still wide open to somehow squeak into a wild card berth, or somehow still contend for the division. Not unheard of. But you don't bring in a veteran right now who have to learn the offense, who's going to leave after the year, just for the season. The Minkah Fitzpatrick move was for more than just this year. It was for the future in addition to now. Ryan Fitzpatrick the other Fitzpatrick would just be for now. You don't make a move just for now at 1-4. I don't see that. You can make a move that's for now and the future like Minkah was, but not just for now, which is what Ryan Fitzpatrick would be. And he's a veteran quarterback that everybody loves, but he's also had his failures. He's a journeyman quarterback. It took him until he was in his late 30s to ever get it going and for anyone to ever know who he was. And he's even dipped since then. He's a roller coaster ride for his whole career, especially recently. And he'd have to learn the offense. Devlin Hodges knows the offense. He's been around this offense even if not playing. Mason Rudolph obviously also knows the offense and has played a little bit more than Devlin, but neither one of them has played that much. But even if it's Devlin Hodges, he knows the offense. He's been around these players. They have confidence in him. Hear all the clips. Go through the channel. It's out there. Another accident there, throwing up Dan. I don't need to promote him any further, but, he has his own show. Pittsburgh Sports Live there. Pittsburgh Sports Live. Go there. find these interviews, find the Steelers Now section, because all these teammates are talking up Devlin Hodges. And yes, they maybe have to say that. But regardless, he played well in mop-up duty. He did. And he showed some command of that offense. He showed some command of, leading the Ducks. Being the duck leader. As a duck caller, professional duck caller that he is, leading the troops. He showed some of that. He did. And I don't see a point of bringing in Ryan Fitzpatrick. You don't have Ben. Mason Rudolph's questionable right now, of course. And Devlin Hodges is your guy. Okay? If he's your guy, the production you probably would get out of him and Ryan Fitzpatrick would probably be honestly very, very similar. It's not like Ryan Fitzpatrick is that incredibly dynamic from what we've seen recently. And he'd have to learn the offense that Devlin already knows. So right there, that's already clear. I don't bring any veteran in. I go with Devlin Hodges if I have to, even though that's the number 3 quarterback, or actually would have been 4th and he was on the practice squad a month or so ago. Separate from that, let's talk a little bit of, I'll answer. I got something on the chat here. I'll answer thoughts on the D coordinator. And this is always brought up. But I said this on past shows as well with Keith Butler. This defense is getting better, and there's now an impact that we can see from Mingus Fitzpatrick. TJ Watt is one of the better players in the league, and that's evident. He's been a standout player on this defense now. Devin Bush is a Defensive Rookie of the Year candidate. He was up there in terms of top 6 in tackles the first few weeks of the season, even though there's weaknesses and there's mistakes he's making, but he is a rookie. You got to give him time. But the first few weeks were really embarrassing because the defense kind of lost some of those games besides the other miscues, and it was same old, same old. I thought going in the offseason and all the moves that were made throughout the offseason, Steven Nelson coming in, the drafting, trading up to get Devin Bush, replacing Ryan Shazier finally, or at least that production in that position being filled. Joe Hayden finally, you'd figure, would be healthy, had something left in the tank. That hasn't really happened. Tuitt's given you more. Bud Dupree has given you some, but it's mostly been TJ Watt still on the pass rush. But the Steelers they've been able to generate the pass rush, whether it's Tuitt or whoever's helping him. It's not just been TJ Watt, and they've been able to generate some pass rush. That's what got to Lamar Jackson in that Ravens game. They certainly got to him in the second half. So the defense has got better as it's been in recent years. But Keith Butler is the issue from 2 years ago in that playoff game against Jacksonville when Blake Bortles marched up and down the field. Okay, they had Todd Haley as a scapegoat, but honestly, Keith Butler wasn't getting it done. It should have been him then. And if this team misses the playoffs, yes, you can say, this quarterback carousel is the issue. They're not going to fire Tomlin. If he's not back, okay, but it's not going to be off of firing. Keith Butler would be the scapegoat. He would be the guy fired, but I don't see any of these moves happening now. Okay? Not mid-season. That's just not how the Steelers do business. They're classy that way. It'd have to really, really get bad. Okay? Like, none of these moves with Tomlin are going to happen right now. But getting to what caused Devlin Hodges to be the guy. Okay, Devlin Hodges got in there in the second half because of an injury to Mason Rudolph. Because of a hit from Earl Thomas to Mason Rudolph. And I get that it was helmet to helmet. Okay, I get that it was helmet to helmet. And you can find him talking about this too on the channel. I get it was helmet to helmet. It certainly was. There's no denying it. Earl Thomas, a veteran player, he knows how to tackle. He knows what he's doing. He's not ignorant. It was helmet to helmet. And there was a penalty for that. And it was concerning. We were in the press box, all the fans of the stadium, all of you watching at home, I'm sure. You're worried about Mason Rudolph above all else. That's what all the players said. That's what Devlin Hodges said. He was worrying about his friend above all else. David DeCastro talked about kind of getting philosophical about how every last play could every play could be your last, and cherishing the moment. And I don't mean to roll my eyes because it's serious stuff. They really are risking their lives and risking themselves every game and every play. And there was a concern that Mason Rudolph's career would be in jeopardy, that his life would be in jeopardy. The man didn't move for what felt like an hour. It was only a few minutes, but he didn't move at all. He didn't get carted off the field, ended up walking off the field, and that whole issue that's taken up space on SteelersNow.com. Not really going to go into that exactly. because he did want to walk. It wasn't like he was being forced to walk. There was carts available, even though some didn't think so. But he wanted to walk, and maybe they shouldn't have listened to him, but regardless, it appeared after being in the hospital, and now he's back at the facility, that it's not the end of the world. It does not appear to be a career-threatening thing. It appears he's relatively speaking okay. He does have a concussion. That's not good, but it appears that he's relatively okay. So that's wonderful. That's great. But also, and I do see some of you here saying hi, some of you, good show, good show. No, I don't get much criticism from this chat. It's interesting. A lot of it is praise. It's not what I see on Twitter. It's a different world out there in the YouTube universe. But also to the point of some were calling for Earl Thomas to be kicked out of the game, and that was a question that I thought maybe should have happened. He had an impact later in that game too, causing a turnover. One of the better defensive players in the league, of course. He's going to have impacts when he's in there. And now some are calling for a suspension, calling for big fine, calling for some punishment on Earl Thomas because that happened with Mason Rudolph. But I've always been a guy that's more about intent than I am result. And I always argue this in hockey and the NHL when they handle punishments and big hits, and there's always a few of them, and players getting hurt, and Todd Bertuzzi situations. The intent for me, and that's not how the NHL does it. That's not really that's usually not how any sport does it. They usually go on the result. But I'm more of an intent guy. I mean, I feel like that's more the fair way to do it. Earl Thomas spoke later too. That's not on our channel, but you can find that out there. We do have it in bed on SteelersNow.com. That, of course, he feels bad. He's praying for Mason Rudolph, as everybody else said. And I don't not believe him there. I know some are rolling their eyes at that. He's generally speaking a good guy. He had his war with Seattle over money and flipping them off as he's getting carted off the field. But he's generally speaking a good guy. I don't believe he's intending to hurt anybody, intending to seriously injure anybody, intending to ruin anyone's career. It isn't like it's Big Ben, a future Hall of Famer. It's not like he's going after Tom Brady. It's not like he would have went into that game scared at Mason Rudolph, who was game managing and was efficient, but wasn't setting the world on fire. Okay? He's not going to be afraid, nor is anybody on the Baltimore Ravens. So you have a situation where he's not trying to hurt anybody. I mean, I don't believe that. I don't believe he's trying to hurt anybody. I don't know about you guys, but the intent I don't see being there. Yeah, you got to throw a penalty, and I wouldn't mind. You know, a suspension I'm not going to complain about. A fine I'm not going to complain about. A big fine I'm not going to complain about. But I don't believe he set his goal out there to try to injure Mason Rudolph. What does that really do? Yeah, Devlin Hodges comes in, and he's even less experienced, but it's not like they don't feel like they can deal with Mason Rudolph. And again, it was helmet to helmet, so that's bad, and you got to penalize that, which did get penalized. But just because Mason Rudolph leaves the game with a concussion, that can happen on any freak play. That can happen anytime. Okay? Concussions can happen whenever. There can be freak injuries out there. They're not always just because of the hit. So I don't believe there needs to be this clamoring of Earl Thomas got to be kicked out of football. Earl Thomas got to be like Vontaze Burfict. Or Earl Thomas is trying to injure players. Earl Thomas got to be suspended for 4 or 5 games. Earl Thomas this. Earl Thomas that. Steelers fans are getting emotional because of the severity of the injury because they watched one of their own lay on the field lifeless for what felt like an hour but was only a few minutes. And it eventually led to them losing a game in which Earl Thomas did have an impact in. I didn't like that, and I maybe could have seen him leave that game. But there doesn't need to be anything else done. Okay? There doesn't need to be anything else done. There does not need to be Earl Thomas all of a sudden being suspended for all of these games because of what happened to Mason Rudolph. He wasn't trying to have that occur. He wasn't trying to injure the man. It's just the case. Now, I do see not everyone's in agreement there with me there. Again, I don't feel like the intent was there. I don't feel like he was intending to hurt anybody. I don't feel like there would even be a motivation for him to try to injure Mason Rudolph. This isn't a Hall of Fame quarterback. This is a rookie. This is an inexperienced quarterback for a rookie in terms of starting. And I don't think he's going to risk game checks or risk games or risk his team for that. And he doesn't have a history like Vontaze Burfict. It's helmet to helmet. That was wrong. But the intent I don't believe is there. I just don't. So I don't need to have all these suspensions that some Steelers fans want. I don't need to have him sitting out game after game because of what happened to Mason Rudolph. I don't believe the intent was there, even with the result being as bad as it is. And the result's getting better and better. It does not appear this to be a career-threatening thing or him getting paralyzed or any of that, which was a concern immediately because the man didn't move. Now, what I got to get out next, and I'm going to get to the decision later in terms of the decision because that was controversial but kind of has died out now in terms of the decision to put the defense out there in overtime. That was, of course, controversial in the hot-button issue on Sunday. But there it is in terms of SteelerNow.com has the coverage, but everywhere else does. And we actually had the Washington Times, who I have a friend, one of my best friends actually, who I do a podcast with and was a colleague of mine. They used our video for this because there were rumors that Dan Snyder covets Mike Tomlin. Dan Snyder, who recently fired Jay Gruden, calling him into the office at 5 a.m. Okay, Jay Gruden did not even get to wake up, have his coffee, sit down, have some Cheerios, and enjoy his morning. No. They wanted him out of the building immediately, okay? He didn't get his breakfast. He didn't get to really wake up. I don't know if he showered or not, but it couldn't have been a good morning for Jay Gruden, and he couldn't have been up that long. I don't care how diligent you are as a head coach. Called into the office at 5 a.m. All the jobs I've had in and out of media, I thank my lucky stars to bosses out there, current and past. No one ever fired me or really talked to me ever and had any important meeting like that, negative or otherwise, at 5 a.m. Thank you for that. Because Jay Gruden can't say the same. And he got fired at 5 in the morning. But then once that happened, then the rumor mill started churning, and that was later on even in that day. They let the morning happen. But then in that day, it became that Dan Snyder wants Mike Tomlin. He's his dream guy. He's going after Mike Tomlin. That should be the next head coach of the Washington Redskins. Okay, that's what Dan Snyder wants. And again, I doubt it's happening this year. It's not going to happen midway through the season. The Steelers wouldn't do that. They wouldn't take the continuity away from this year midway through. Tomlin is focused on coaching a 1-4 team right now, whereas the interim coach for the Redskins need to be focused on coaching an 0-5 team right now. They have less chances, obviously, of saving anything, but they're worried about the here and now, and they would love to do it, but Steelers aren't going to worry about this now. It'll be in the offseason if anything happens. And as much as I've always said the Steelers, and this is still the case, the Steelers are not going to fire Mike Tomlin. The Rooney family does not fire head coaches. They didn't fire Chuck Noll when he went through an entire 80s decade with only a few playoff appearances after the dynasty of the 70s. They let him even go into the early 90s. They didn't fire Bill Cowher with all those AFC Championship game losses. Many of those were upsets. And even years where they missed the playoffs repeatedly. He had some bad years too, some lean years like Tomlin now having this and last season. But Tomlin and Cowher's records and resumes are very, very similar. And I know it's a new era in social media and people, what have you done for me lately, and much more, and fans don't want to wait around and they don't realize that yes, he has not been successful in comparison to Bill Belichick, but he's been successful in comparison to everybody else. So he's not going to be fired. It would have to be a 2-14 season, and yes, they only have one win, so maybe you only need one more to see what happens there. But it would have to be a 2-14 season, back-to-back years probably, for them to fire Mike Tomlin. And I also get that the Steelers weren't changing as much as Todd Haley kept being the scapegoat, but a lot of these fans may just be sick of the same old act with Mike Tomlin in terms of game management, in terms of he's been there a while and that can get tired. I get it all. I'm not saying that I don't feel you. They're just not going to fire Mike Tomlin. That's just not how this, it would have to be several years of it getting really, really bad. Not just one, not even just two, several years. Like it or not. And before the season, this was an issue in training camp that we talked to him about, that they didn't offer him that 2-year extension they normally do. There was only the 1 year. He didn't like to talk about that, but that kind of was telling, especially being aligned with Big Ben and what his future contract was, that they're not going to have them around forever. I wouldn't be surprised if Tomlin wants to walk away. I wouldn't have been surprised if going into the season him and Big Ben kind of talked and they were kind of aligned with each other, that they would both leave at the same time. And yes, Chris Boswell is kicking great. Chris Boswell is actually kicking perfect. So that's one of the bright spots this year, besides seeing Devin Bush's emergence and TJ Watt, of course. But as all the miscues going around, yes, Chris Boswell is one of the better players. It hasn't meant anything. None of these kicks have really mattered, but he has been perfect so far without any big kicks, after we know the season he had a year ago and how bad that was. But in terms of Tomlin, he's not going to be fired, whether you like it or not. But again, I'm not saying that the era maybe shouldn't be over. Won a Super Bowl early on. Yes, it had Cowboys players, but he led the team to another Super Bowl appearance. He led the team to division title, playoff appearances. He couldn't beat the Patriots, but nobody else could. He didn't get the resume of Bill Belichick, but nobody else has it. Okay, he had some playoff disappointments. We know the game to Jacksonville, but that could again go to the defense, not just Tomlin. And of course, there's been issues in terms of clock management, in terms of mistakes that I will get to, in terms of even the decision to start the overtime with the defense on the field. That, for me, of course, didn't make much sense. I mean, you can kind of try to rationalize it where it wasn't like it was years ago, where both teams do touch the football, or as long as there's not a touchdown. But the first team in overtime, if you score a touchdown, you win the game. The Steelers didn't want to try to have that be the case for them. They were just, I guess, planning on puttering around with field goals, which Boswell's been kicking them. But still, you rely on your defense. You say your defense is strong, your defense is hot, but you got to give the offense a shot in overtime, so I could criticize him there like anybody else. That was confusing. But also, he's been wildly successful in terms of winning season after winning season, etc. They're not going to fire him. But when you're around a place, and this happened to Mike McCarthy in Green Bay with a similar resume, and a championship there, eventually, players either tune you out, and I'm not saying that's necessarily happening. I do see a lot of interaction. They still seem to be loving the guy. But maybe that happened in the past. I don't know. But eventually you wear out your welcome, okay? When you're in one place for a long period of time, you eventually can wear out your welcome. Eventually, you just need to try something new. It happened with Joe Girardi with the Yankees, and yes, they're winning without him now. It's happened everywhere, where even when there's success, and even when there's recent success, and even when maybe it's not fair to you. But in this day and age in sports, coaches are getting fired after 1 year. That's what's not fair. But eventually you just wear out your welcome. Eventually you just need to try something new. Eventually you want to move on. The team wants to move on. The fans want to move on. The media wants to move on. And eventually you just all move on, no matter what the situation is. And if they're moving on, regardless of the future, whether even if he gets fired or moves on or chooses to leave or whatever, Mike Tomlin deserves to be in the Steelers Hall of Fame someday. He has the resume of Bill Cowher. He's probably going to be deserving to be in Canton someday in the Pro Football Hall of Fame like Bill Cowher. Okay, Bill Cowher had his day this year. The same thing should happen for Mike Tomlin. Been wildly successful, even if not to the level of Bill Belichick, of course. But it's also true that maybe it's time to move on. And that's okay. So then that brought up, I wouldn't hate this. I wouldn't be against this, and I could see the Redskins wanting to do this. This is a John Gruden Tampa Raiders situation where you trade maybe if the Raiders offered the Steelers after the Minkah Fitzpatrick trade especially. Okay, after that trade especially, if the Redskins offer the Steelers a first-round pick, and they're going to be bad. They're 0-5. They're bad as I'm speaking. So that's going to be a good pick. I doubt they're going to offer their first overall pick if that's what it is. But regardless, they're bad. And they're going to keep being bad, okay? That Redskins team is not turning it around by any means. So, the Redskins, if they offer you a first-round pick for Mike Tomlin, for your head coach, I'd jump at it. I wouldn't be scared of it. And I know I always see and hear a lot of fire Mike Tomlin, or Tomlin needs to go, or Tomlin clock management, all that with Mike Tomlin. I get it, okay? I get why you maybe feel that way, but they're just not going to fire him. But this is the way out. And I don't know who would be the next head coach. I mean, no, I don't want Bill Cowher back. No, Bill Belichick's not coming. None of that's worth talking about. You shouldn't want any of that either. Okay, though that time's gone. Bill Cowher wouldn't be able to deal with this day and age of players, I don't feel. Belichick's not coming. But if a team offers you a first-round pick or offers you picks, maybe a second and a third or something, I don't know, because the Redskins aren't going to offer the first overall pick if that's what it is. And they're pretty bad, and so's Miami, and we'll see. Bengals. But then I would consider it. And maybe then you moved on from AB, you moved on from Bell, whether you wanted to or by choice or however it happened. Ben now being hurt. Who knows about the future of Ben? He wants to come back. He wants the job again, but who knows? Got many others vying for that gig, depending on how the year finishes and how good or bad the team is overall. But I wouldn't be against moving on from Tomlin now. They're not going to fire him, but I wouldn't be against taking a first-round pick especially, or taking some compensation from a team, doing a trade, doing something. He hasn't, more on the contract, but hypothetically, if the Redskins offer you a first-round pick, if they want to trade for Mike Tomlin, if they offer you a second and a third, if the first can't happen because it's first overall, who the hell knows? Especially if it is first overall. Then I would do it. And it's nothing against Mike Tomlin again. I think he's a Hall of Famer. I think he gets very wildly disrespected among Steeler fans, and they're not going to fire him. It'd have to be this and years like it that are that bad. But maybe it's just finally time for the time to be over, for the era to be over. It can just finally be that time, which eventually happens to everybody. Except for maybe Bill Belichick, they're never going to want to move on from him, but eventually he'll choose to leave. But that time eventually comes for everyone. And, well, none of that's going to happen in the regular season. Maybe at the end of the year, that's something you discuss. Okay. Here we go. No, Mike is a great coach. He'll get this turned around, and he's worth way more than a first-round pick. You're crazy, Mike. Isn't going anywhere. Hell no. Robert Rudder. Well, again, I might be crazy. I might be crazy in general, whether we're talking about Tomlin or just life. Okay, yeah, I'm crazy. I agree. But you should hear what everybody else is saying. You should hear what fans are saying. That almost now becoming the unpopular opinion to say Tomlin shouldn't leave. This man, every year, every time they lose a game, it's fire Mike Tomlin. And that was during playoff years. It's been going on for a while. That was even AFC Championship game where they couldn't beat the Patriots. That was even that type of year. Oh man, fire Mike Tomlin. One wrong decision, one wrong call. And yes, there's been bad calls and things to be desired when it comes to Mike Tomlin. I can get the angst. But he's not going to get fired. The Steelers don't operate that way. And he's wildly disrespected for the resume he put forth, for the success he has had, and for what he's had to freaking deal with. I mean, there was the joking tweet out there that went viral for a while where everybody was putting it out there and nobody knew who copied each other because it was Adam Schefter, everybody and their brother, talking about how Mike Tomlin maybe deserves the Nobel Peace Prize for dealing with Antonio Brown, knowing what we later knew about Antonio Brown, knowing getting as much out of him as he did and dealing with him for so long. Some argued he messed that up at a time, but later we all realized how just insane and ridiculous and asinine and buffoon and clownish Antonio Brown is. And Tomlin dealt with all of that and got a lot out of that for a while. So there were some then saying he deserves the Nobel Peace Prize, and I wouldn't be against giving it to him for that. I mean, as insane as that was. But, I mean, there's not many head coaches that I wouldn't take a first-round pick for, especially from a bad team. If you're telling me a team that's 0-5 right now that is not going to get more than a few wins this season if they're lucky to win any games, that is going to have a top 5 pick, almost guaranteed. If not, I mean, if it's any higher, they're not going to do it, I'd imagine. But if they would, surely you take it. If it's a first overall pick, surely you do it. There's not many teams out there that would not take a first-round pick, especially an early round, a top 5, top 10, first overall for their head coach. Honestly speaking, there's not many head coaches that I wouldn't trade for that in terms of what that pick could do. And Devin Bush has already been trading up for him, what that could do. You're not, unless it's Belichick, I probably would trade any coach in the league for a first-round pick. So, yeah, I don't think Tomlin's Teflon. Tomlin is leaving, book it. Again, it could be Tomlin wants to go. Tomlin's answer to, I'm worrying about the now. The standard is this standard that we haven't met, and we're 1-4, and I got to coach a 1-4 football team. Yeah, you do. Okay, that's what you should be focused on. I get it. But in all reality, he didn't dismiss the claims. He didn't dismiss the rumors. He didn't say he wouldn't be interested. We all know he has a son there in Maryland who was going to be at Pitt and then ends up in Maryland. And we know he loves family and be closer to his son. He'd be with another historic franchise, like he's been coach of the Steelers. He won a Super Bowl with the Steelers, historic franchise. One as an assistant with the Buccaneers. It's not an historic franchise, obviously, but it would be another football hotbed, an historic franchise. They hadn't won in a while. They'd be hungry for a winner. He doesn't need to win a Super Bowl there for those fans to love him. If he takes them to the playoffs a few years in a row, they would love him down there. And I know that market a little bit from friends down there and from people down there and having been down there and having a best friend that now is dealing with that. They would love him down there with a few playoff appearances, because they haven't had that consistency in a while. So Tomlin could become Vince Lombardi if he even gets into the NFC Championship game or gets a Super Bowl appearance out of it down there. Yeah, they love Joe Gibbs because of the glory days, but he had his bad years when he came back, and they were fine with those because that's still someone's success in comparison to how bad it's been otherwise and how bad it is now and how bad it's even been under Jay Gruden and most recently. So they would love him there. I could see that being an option. If he does leave Pittsburgh, I could definitely see that being an option. And I could see him maybe just wanting this to maybe finally be the end of the era. The Steelers wanting this to be the end of the era, realizing that he's done a lot for the franchise, realizing there's been success there, and the Rooneys and Tomlin realizing they don't want a firing. They're not going to fire Mike Tomlin, even if this is a 2-14 season. They're not going to fire Mike Tomlin. But maybe it's just time to part ways. And for a first-round pick, I'd do it. It wouldn't be disrespecting him. It's finally wrapping up an era that maybe finally should close. Maybe it has worn thin. Maybe it is just the end of this era. There's no coach besides maybe Belichick that I wouldn't ship off or trade for a first-round pick, especially a top 5, a top 10, or first overall, obviously, for sure. And even if it's a second or third and not the first because it is first overall and they don't want to do that, or maybe it's another team, or who knows. But I could see this being the beginning of the end for Tomlin in Pittsburgh. It won't be a firing, but I think there is some validity to those Redskins rumors. They are interested in him. They would definitely hire him right away. He seems exactly like what Dan Snyder would want. It's a splash hire with a resume, with a championship, a proven guy, going into a big market, going into an historic franchise who's already dealt with all of that. He would do it. He would love it. It would fit a Dan Snyder hire, and the bar wouldn't be that high for Tomlin to jump over to be loved there and have success there. We're in Pittsburgh. If he doesn't get into the Super Bowl, fans are pissed. Well then, they're not real Steeler fans. By the way, that's the wrong use of there, but regardless, well then, they're not real Steeler fans because the guy deserves more respect than people are giving him. I'm sorry, people need to check around the NFL and tell me they're better than Mike T all over. Yeah, of course. I agree with you there. I do think this is the beginning of the end. I do think they're going to mutually part ways. I do think maybe the Redskins rumors are true, and I would take a first-round pick for Mike Tomlin now. It doesn't mean, though, I'm disrespecting his legacy, like some are. It doesn't mean that he doesn't deserve Steelers Hall of Honor, doesn't deserve even Pro Football Hall of Fame, doesn't deserve respect, doesn't deserve to come to the midfield at some point when he retires and get praised and have the Lombardi Trophy there. He deserves all of it. He's done all of it, okay? The accomplishments are there. But Robert, I would ask you to scan Twitter someday. Search Mike Tomlin in Twitter and see what you get. You'll get legit reality from me where I'm respecting, I'm appreciating. It's not mutually exclusive. You can respect and appreciate the legacy and realize maybe this time is over. And realizing that would actually help your franchise, a move like that with the Redskins, a trade like that, especially for a first rounder. But there are many, many Steelers fans out there. Maybe this is the minority, but they're damn loud. It's the loud minority for sure. This is the same group that didn't respect Big Ben, who's a Hall of Famer as well, and wanted him gone even before knowing the severity of his injury, wanting Rudolph to replace him, as ridiculous as that was, just being happy the man was hurt, and all he's done for the franchise, and the fact that he's a future Hall of Famer, and yes, he threw a lot of picks last year, but he's had great seasons. He's masked offensive lines that have been putrid. He's won them 2 championships, been to a third. The numbers are there career-wise. He's going to the Hall of Fame. Steelers fans don't always respect that, don't always respect Big Ben. Same thing with Tomlin and his resume. Does not always get the respect. It is ridiculous. He should get the respect. He should have his legacy be respected. It's very similar to what Mike McCarthy was in Green Bay, and he should get more respect than he does by Packer fans. Or John Harbaugh in Baltimore, and they now love him, but a lot of them for a while dipped in terms of loving him. It took Lamar Jackson and them now getting better to finally love him again. But there should be appreciation there. Similar resume as well. So he deserves all of that, but I think it is finally time to kind of move on from the Tomlin era. I think that's okay to finally do. I do. And I think it actually is going to happen. The way he answered it, the rumors out there, how that it makes sense for the Redskins, even if it's not them, but I like that move, I think it would happen. I think they would do it. I think the Redskins would do it, and I think the Steelers would even maybe have a mutual conversation with Tomlin, especially if this year ends really bad and they don't even sniff the playoffs. And they have an easy schedule, as I alluded to back in the beginning of this show. That schedule is not hard. They're 1-4. That's bad. That's unacceptable, but they could dig out. That division's not good. There's nobody else there that's that great. They almost beat the Ravens with their third-string quarterback, and the Ravens having everyone. And it's still, they're not out of it yet. But if it doesn't work and then it gets really bad and it gets worse and it's not corrected, yes, Keith Butler, who I answered earlier on the D coordinator, yes, he should be the scapegoat. He should have been already. But I could see a mutual parting of ways with Tomlin. It wouldn't be a firing, but I could see something happen in a trade. I could see something going down, him even stepping down despite the contract extension and then being viable, or them doing the trade to make sure they get compensation and avoid him just doing that. Because I could see him now wanting out maybe, wanting to turn another chapter in his career, wanting a new challenge. The Redskins would be all of that. Wouldn't be crazy. And now lastly here, as I still see some of you watching this, I still see some of you in the chat, it's not been as much chat activity as I've had in recent weeks. Usually we get this thing moving. Usually we get this thing back and forth. I want more of that. So if you're still here, and I see many of you are, you can just watch. You can sit back and watch. You can hear me preach if you want and give you the gospel, according to Mike Asti and Pittsburgh Sports Live here and SteelersNow.com. You can also join in. And if you join in, you maybe get me to linger around a little longer. Otherwise, I'm gonna close this chapter here after one more segment, and it's gonna be this, and maybe some of you won't like this either. Juju Smith-Schuster fumbled and helped lead the Steelers to a loss. Okay, his fumble led to a loss. Juju Smith-Schuster fumbled the football in overtime and led to a Steelers loss. Taking the Mike Tomlin controversy and the decision to to play defense and defer, and I don't agree with that. Nobody really did it. It was kind of crazy. A touchdown would win it. I get all of that, and I get your concern there, and I get how insane that was. I maybe get his rationale because he did have a third-string quarterback and field position hadn't been in their favor, and the kickoffs had been what he said they were. But still, you got to try to get that touchdown to win. You got to at least try, not believe nothing in your offense. How can you give them any confidence there? I know Steelers fans are hating on him, speaking of Tomlin here, but unless Lincoln Riley is coming through that door, I don't see who else is going to be a good fit and a better coach. So let's just say he goes who is, and I'm assuming now. Yeah, again, I'm not saying that they have anyone better coming in through the pipeline. I'm not saying that I would force the move or love the move, but maybe the time for the era to be over is now. It's hard to turn down a first-round pick if that is offered. It is now going to be back-to-back years of disappointment for Tomlin, even with the quarterback situation and the injuries, and that's not his fault there. But there have been issues that certainly are, including that decision I just said about the overtime call to defer, as weird as that was. And Lincoln Riley's not, yes, he's doing it in Oklahoma. He's taking over for Bob Stoops and leading to the national title games and into the playoff, and that opportunity to be in that contention. But there's no guarantee that Lincoln Riley sets the world on fire. There's no guarantee that Lincoln Riley is Sean McVay. There's no guarantee that because he's doing it in college, he's going to do it in the NFL. We've seen coaches flame out from college to the NFL and not make that transition be successful. There's no guarantee there. Okay? So I'm not saying I love Lincoln Riley by any means. I'm not saying they would go ahead and get the flashiest toy around. Who knows who they would hire? Mike Tomlin was not a flashy toy when he got the job. Yes, he was a disciple on a great defense. Yes, he won a ring as an assistant coach. Yes, he learned under Tony Dungy and then briefly with John Gruden. He had a good resume. But he wasn't wildly popular. He wasn't known worldwide. He wasn't the flashy toy that replaced Bill Cowher. He didn't have the resume of Bill Cowher like what Dan Snyder would clearly want to bring in, because that's what he wants all the time if he goes and gets Mike Tomlin, like he's been doing with flashy toys. The Schottenheimers, bringing back Joe Gibbs, even Steve Spurrier from college. Lincoln Riley would be that guy, gets from his college pedigree at Oklahoma, and he would be that flashy toy. I don't know if that's a Steeler way. They're not like Dan Snyder. I don't see that being a Steeler move. I see them more looking for a great assistant who's already proven himself in the NFL. I don't know. But there's no guarantee that would work out or that would be great either. And a lot of this does hinge on the players and the future of the players, which, again, I'll get to here when I go back to Juju. But we need a coach who can lead our team to championships, a strong leader who has experienced the players will respect. Of course that's the case, and that, I guess, kind of alludes to maybe him disagreeing with Robert in terms of his assessment of bringing Lincoln Riley in. Maybe that's a prediction, maybe that's who you want, I don't know. But I don't see that happening. I don't see that being a Steeler move, bringing in Lincoln Riley. And yeah, I would rather have a guy who's been in the NFL system, even if it's an assistant coach. I don't want an old head who's been around, and I don't want that. I don't want to bring Bill Cowher back. I don't even really want Belichick, even though he's the greatest of all time. I don't want Schottenheimer somehow resurrected from the dead. I don't want to dig up Vince Lombardi. Okay, I don't even want Mike McCarthy, who is going to be the guy that's going to be in tons of rumors. He is a Western Pennsylvania boy, coached against and beat the Steelers in a Super Bowl, so had been there, had a solid resume with a Hall of Fame quarterback in Aaron Rodgers. Maybe didn't achieve as much as they would have liked. Packer fans have lost favor in him. He always said his Steelers were his dream job. He got to coach against them in the Super Bowl, but certainly would love coaching for them in the Super Bowl in the big game. Mike McCarthy is available out there, did not take the Bengals job when that was a rumor for him this past season, or the Browns as well. He was in those mixes, but decided to kind of stay in the sidelines, which is a good move for him. He has tons of money still, and he'll be able to pick a better job, which would say be the Steelers if that opportunity comes, or a job at least he wants more, being from the area. But I wouldn't want that necessarily. It's retreading the same thing. I wouldn't want that. That would be, I could say, a Dan Snyder move. I wouldn't want the Steelers to do it. I wouldn't think that'd be a good move for the Steelers, but that would be better than Lincoln Riley, per se. Because Lincoln Riley is just that unproven, shiny toy. You either, in what the best situation would be, an assistant coach who's been in the NFL, who knows the NFL, but isn't necessarily trying to retread a career that's more on the end, more on the downturn, but also not someone from college who's proven nothing in the NFL, and you have no guarantees for, and you maybe use that shiny toy but nothing else. Some mix there. some Mike Tomlin-like assistant, like when Mike Tomlin was with Tampa as a defensive assistant. That's the type of guy the Steelers probably are going to hire or should hire, or I would want them to hire. In all honesty, that would be the better play. So I wouldn't want Mike McCarthy on that end of the spectrum, and I wouldn't want Lincoln Riley, but we'll see. And I do give credence to the rumors. But regardless of who the head coach is, the future of this team is no longer Antonio Brown. It's no longer Le'Veon Bell. It's no longer even Ben Roethlisberger, regardless, even if he plays another couple years and comes back from his injury. He's not the future of the team. And I did shows on this in the past in terms of, and of course you can find it there, Pittsburgh Sports Live. Search that in YouTube. And then do this for me. Click on the subscribe button, making it easier for us to get the content to you. So click on the subscribe. But I did a show on Devin Bush being the future face of the franchise. Of course, that makes sense. It took him a while, and there's some growing pains going to happen. It happened with Polamalu even as a rookie. But he's going to be the face of this franchise, the face of that defense. And in the face of the offense, you're looking at James Conner, you're looking at Juju. You're looking at two guys, though, that despite playing well, despite above expectations, I mean, James Conner, I didn't expect him to do close to what he was able to do last year with 900-plus yards, including injuries. He would have had 1,000 guaranteed, replacing Bell. All those touchdowns, especially early in the season. I was shocked. I lost a bet. With former fan colleague Doran Dickerson. I didn't think it would happen. I thought he would flame out and they wouldn't have a running back, but he became the number one last year and ran like a number one. Juju had one of the better rookie years ever, right up there with Randy Moss. He's already had a first 2 years in the league that are right up there with Randy Moss in terms of legendary, in terms of comparison to Hall of Famers. Randy Moss, T.O., Jerry Rice, etc. Not many, though. And with all that being said and how great they've been playing the last couple of years and above expectations they've been, and it's Pro Bowl level for James Conner, running back, replacing Bell, and Juju now replacing AB with AB gone. And yes, I said before also in past shows that you can find throughout the channel that it's not just on Juju now to replace AB, and yes, he's the number one, he's a Pro Bowler, he can get it done. He's had an okay year, not great, but an okay year. But why hasn't it been better? Part of it is, and I said this before, they need a number two. There needs to be a number two. Whether no one has emerged. It was Moncrief. Thought it should be Washington. It was Moncrief. He couldn't catch a pass to save his life. Ends up fumbling every single pass that ends up going his direction. That's not going to work clearly. Deontay Johnson has kind of filled that bill, but maybe not fully healthy. And he's a rookie, so you shouldn't expect him to do it, but he's been okay when in there for sure. James Washington now hurt and going to miss several weeks, but he had chemistry with Mason Rudolph, but didn't get really there was no chemistry built during the regular season. Didn't get really to get in there, got the opportunity after Moncrief. That didn't happen. So not having a number two has hurt Juju. It has made teams double cover him like AB had. It's going to make it tougher on him than when he was the second guy and just getting the yards and being open a lot more when AB was taking all the double coverage. Duh. Makes sense, of course. Everyone's going to agree with that. But the other thing is that regardless of who's the quarterback, okay, regardless of whether it's this guy or somebody else or Big Ben or Mason Rudolph, no, it doesn't matter. Devlin Hodges is calm, cool, and collected. Read all about it on SteelersNow.com. Doesn't matter. Okay, he's preparing for his first start. He's calm, cool, and collected. He's a professional Doug Hunter, now also going to be an Enzo starting quarterback. Maybe we're in the age of the Duck Dynasty. Doesn't matter, though, who's the quarterback. If you don't have that solid number two, it's going to make it harder on the number one, especially with the young quarterback, whether it's Rudolph or Devlin Hodges, even with Ben. But I'll tell you one thing that is on Juju, and is on James Conner. And I know these are nice guys, and especially the James Conner stories out there. It's wonderful, him getting over cancer. I mean, it's an incredible story, one of the greatest in sports history, and I touched on this last week. Nobody wants to criticize James Conner. Nobody wants to criticize Juju Smith-Schuster. They want to defend them at all opportunities. Okay, especially Juju. He's a fun-loving guy. He's a personality. Yes, we know about social media. We know about the James Conner story. We know him playing high school in Erie, playing college at Pitt, now being a Steeler. We know about the draft and them taking a chance on him when others wouldn't. We know about the cancer story and getting over cancer and how wonderful that is. We know about Juju and being that fun-loving personality, the nice guy doing charity work, showing up at proms, helping kids, all of that. That's the opposite of AB right now. I get why you'd love them. I get it, and I'm not saying I hate them as people by any means. But there are some who just don't want to criticize them ever. Who just give them a free pass. Who just let him alone. Who just love him so much they would defend him at all turns. James Conner and Juju have both got it done on the field. They've both been above expectations, arguably. They both replaced 2 All-Pros, and it's not easy to do so, and they're going to be the future of this team, I'm sure. They're not going anywhere. But both James Conner and Juju have also fumbled away games, combined for 5 in the last 2 years. James Conner, multiple games last year, kind of ruining the good faith he had in the great season he was having. Fumbled away games, couldn't hold on to the damn football. And they only missed the playoffs by that one game to the Ravens. All those games they lost, they should have won with all that talent. It wasn't a season like this. They didn't start this bad. They were slow moving, but they were winning games. And then we know the early tie against the Browns before Baker Mania. We know blowing the game against the Chargers. We know losing to the Ravens. We know the Bronco game, the Raider game with all those turnovers. Some of that was on Ben. Some of that was on the entire team. The defense wasn't good enough. I get all of it. But regardless, and Chris Boswell missing kicks, regardless, James Conner fumbled away multiple games that cost them those games. That cost them the playoffs last year. Did anybody go out James Conner? Not really. I threw up a tweet. This year. That got some attention, but people also were pissed at me because everyone wants to give him a pass. Can't. Okay? If you're going to be in the opportunity as the number 1 back, if you're going to be somebody who has the opportunity to be that featured back that Tomlin loves, even though there's Samuels and others who are toting the rock, but Tomlin prefers the feature back. If that's going to be you, whether it should have been you or not, it's immaterial, then you got to get criticized like one. If that was Bell, you guys would be furious. If it was anybody, you'd be furious. You cannot cover him or hug him because of the cancer story or because you like him. You can't do it with James Conner, and you can't do it with Juju now. Juju, regardless of the call that was questionable from Tomlin, regardless of losing Mason Rudolph and Devlin Hodges coming in there, regardless of James Washington's injury that got overshadowed in the game, but he also got hurt and he's going to miss several weeks now, regardless of the pass rush and T.J. Watt getting it done, but not really anybody else, and regardless of the fact that, yes, they've converted turnovers the last few weeks, and yes, they've generated turnovers, something they hadn't done the last few years, but they haven't been able to score off those turnovers, and 6 points off 5 turnovers against San Francisco, regardless of all of that, those 2 guys have fumbled away games. San Fran, for Conner, they forced 5 turnovers and only scored 6 points. I get it. That's unacceptable on the offense, and that's not just James Conner. Of course not. And they needed more from the running game. They need to go to him more. I get it. James Conner costs us games with fumbles. Yeah, he does. I'm glad you're on that page. I don't see that much, though, when I scan Twitter. I don't see that much when you hear fans on the street. I usually get hate when I bring that up in the past, so I'm with you there. He does. And he has. It's a fact. It's not up in the air. Okay? He's a great guy. He's always willing to do the interview. He had a great story. It's great that he's local. Well and good. Wonderful. But he's fumbled away games. And that San Fran game's on James Conner, despite the five turnovers, only 6 points. Without the James Conner fumble, they probably win that game. And then you go to the Ravens here most recently, where despite everything that went on, I mean, you thought your starting quarterback was dead. Despite that, you go to overtime, you have a weird decision, but it doesn't really matter because neither team scores that touchdown, so then you move on after both teams had the football. And then Juju fumbles away the game. Juju fumbled there. Juju fumbled against the Saints last year that cost you the playoffs. You wouldn't have had to worry about that kneeling against the Ravens and hoping for that game and still missing out. If Juju hung on to the football and held the football against New Orleans. New Orleans, yeah, they got screwed in the playoffs, but they benefited in the regular season to even be in that seeding position because Juju fumbled the ball. Juju cost them a game last year. That was the most critical game of all last year, eventually costing them the playoffs. And Juju, yes, he stands there unlike AB sometimes. He takes it on. We all lingered around his locker room, or around his locker. He had the scrum around him. It sucked for him. He was waiting. He answered every question. He says he needs to be better. He says and does the right thing. So does James Conner. He talked after the game, and he admitted his faults to the past. He tried to, defend Juju. I get it. They're saying and doing the right things. This is mostly directed at you, the fans, and a lot of people out there, even colleagues in media, who don't want to criticize James Conner, who don't want to criticize Juju. Because unlike the guys before those positions, and Bell and AB, these two guys are the opposite of toxic in the locker room. They're great guys. They're great guys with the media. And you don't want to soil that relationship as bad as it was with the other two in terms of the media and them. I could see the reasoning. But regardless, you got to be truthful. You got to be fair. You got to keep it real. That's what I do. James Conner's fumbled away games. Unacceptable. You got to criticize him for it. Juju Smith-Schuster has fumbled away games and critical key games, even more so than Conner. Of course, just this last week and then the New Orleans game last year, the two fumbles of his career have been critical, bad fumbles that cost them those games. Cost them the playoffs last year, despite everything that happened, and cost them that Ravens game, despite everything that happened. Those two fumbles don't happen. They win that game last year. They're in the playoffs, regardless of the drama, regardless of everything and all the upsets. And then they beat the Ravens likely without the fumble. You can't defend them. You can't. They're great guys. They're great players even, but they deserve criticized when it's warranted, and it's warranted with the fumbling problem. So I'm going to round it out here. If we were 3-2 right now, people would be saying what a great coach, but now we're getting D back to a championship football we had back this year on offense. I don't know. Yeah, I get kind of what you're saying, even though it's weirdly written. Yes, if the record was better, if it was 3-2, and it could at least be 2-3 if they would have won the San Fran game with the 5 turnovers, they should have won at least that game. They could have beat Seattle. They lose that game by 2 points with some controversy there. And yes, Russell Wilson marched up and down the field. The defense didn't play well there. And they should have beat the Ravens without the Juju fumble. You give the Patriots the game, of course. They beat the Bengals, who are awful. That's not impressive as being your only win of the year. But if the record was better, if it was different, whether it's luck or whatever, and they haven't been the worst 1-4 football team ever, I did defend them to open up the show in saying that. They've also had some bad luck. But if they were 3-2, then nobody would be talking about a lot of this. Although I'm not sure the Redskins, I disagree with you a little bit, the Redskins would still want Mike Tomlin. They would still go after Mike Tomlin. They would still be firing their head coach at 5 in the morning. They would still have got rid of Jay Gruden. They still would be 0-5. And Dan Snyder still would want that type of flashy toy as his proven head coach for his market and for his historic team. He'd want that, okay? He'd even like it somehow for PR in terms of having an African-American head coach with the team name that they have, and maybe, dissipating that whole controversy because he's hiring a minority. They hadn't done that. They had a black quarterback win a Super Bowl in Doug Williams, but they hadn't had it be a head coach. Well, maybe they think that would help PR-wise as well as helping the football team. They'd still want Mike Tomlin, and I'd still do it, even if it was a 3-2 record they had right now, knowing the future. Maybe just the time is just over now. The tenure should just be done. Great coach, Hall of Famer, I get all that. But maybe you just finally close that chapter. Nobody can be around forever. I would still be down with doing it, especially for a first-round pick from a team that bad. So I think that wouldn't totally end that, but yes, he getting some praise if he turned this around. Certainly would. Make teams want him even more, and he would be if the record was better right now with everything that happened. And it almost could be. It was close. Small margin. The Juju fumble that I just went into a rant on, then it could be. And the other one that I don't know why YouTube's flagging, but after 3 Heisman QBs, and this is about Lincoln Riley again, that's probably going to be the guy that's called up. I don't think he's better than Mike T. But Mike T has got a shitty hand right now based on everything that's gone on and based on what he had to deal with in the past. For sure, I don't think any other head coach, even Belichick, will be winning with all these backup quarterbacks. But there's still questionable decisions, and I still wouldn't mind moving on from the Tomlin era. They aren't going to fire him, so maybe this is how you get it done. And yes, Lincoln Riley is going to get an NFL head coaching job the second he wants one. He is that shiny toy. He is that guy from college. I mean, if you can have a guy from Texas Tech be under 500 and get a head coaching job, after firing a guy who's only been there for 1 year, Arizona did that. They brought in a head coach because he was, an attractive guy that had an under 500 record and had a lot of points on offense. I don't know what they were doing. But that's what they did. Sean McVay with the Rams. He's getting it done, led them to a Super Bowl, but young, unproven prior to getting there. That's the cool thing to do now with college coaches, and Lincoln Riley is that next shiny toy. If the Cowboys ever fire Jason Garrett, he'll probably be the guy in Big D, although they're winning now, and it's unlikely Jason Garrett goes as long as they're a playoff team that wins there. But that remains to be seen, and Lincoln Riley is going to be that shiny toy. He'll get a job. I just don't see him being a fit with the Steelers, a fit with the culture. They're never a team that usually does that. They're going to score points on offense. Things will come together. Yes, the receivers have been a problem. Maybe he'd help the offense. I'm not saying he couldn't be an offensive wizard and help the offense as the defense emerges. Maybe it's a fit on the football field. I don't see Lincoln Riley fitting in Pittsburgh. I don't see him being a Pittsburgh guy. I don't see him wanting to be there for a while. Maybe he would. Who knows? I don't see the Rooneys being obsessed with the shiny toy either. They brought in Mike Tomlin when he was unproven and was just an assistant, wasn't the shiny toy. Bill Cowher was just an assistant, wasn't the shining toy. Same thing with Chuck Noll, even way, way, way back. So that's not what the Steelers do. They don't usually go after the shiny toy. We'll see, though. That's going to do it, though, for this one. Yep, you fans have always had a bone to pick with Tomlin for sure. Maybe it is time to move on. I think it is time to finally move on. I think the era finally should close. I don't understand, though, why you had so many bones to pick with him. I think legacy should be appreciated, even though maybe it is time to move on. And I get the coaching style and I get the decisions, but nobody besides Belichick has been more successful in the last decade as a head coach. And even the Cowboys winning now, think of all the years they had to put up with Garrett. A lot of years teams have had to put up with bad football and bad coaching. Steelers have actually been lucky to be as consistent and have that continuity. It's not Belichick level, but it has been successful, even if not as much the last couple years. I'm going to close it on that one. And want to remind you, of course, hit up the family of networks, PittsburghSportsNow.com. Pittsburgh Hockey Now is the Penguins now. End of the season, PittsburghSoccerNow.com, SteelersNow.com. You're going to be able to read our game day analysis, our news, notes, and everything we have. We're going to, cover it. There it is, SteelersNow.com. If it's about Tomlin, if it's about rumors, if it's about analysis, if it's about the games, if it's about Antonio Brown, we even got some still there. And you guys say you don't want it, but that's where the views are, folks. They're still there. That's where the money's still getting paid. Okay. AB's still paying the bills a little bit for me while he has me blocked on Twitter, AB. But hit up our family of networks. Make sure to click on the subscribe button, subscribe to this show, subscribe to this channel, make it easier for us to get the content to you. Help us keep these lights on here in the studio. Find the show, pghsportslive.com, as well as SteelersNow.com, of course, where this one's going to be, or whichever site corresponds to what I'm talking about, because I have WVU shows, mostly WVU football now into season, WVSportsNow.com. Go there as well, where those shows are. There's even a Pirates site now with PiratesTalk.com, and I did a show on Bob Nutting, and it's his team, folks, even though you want it to be yours. That's there, PiratesTalk.com. Pittsburgh Sports Now, Pittsburgh Hockey Now. Dan has his Penguins live chats. We're going to kick it into gear, and we're going to be back with the Corner 3. Kale and I did a lot of those shows. He's going to have a new co-host who's going to help him out with me, everything I got going on. Going to kind of step it aside for Chris Mueller, who's done some freelance work for us on PSN and on the Steelers site in camp, helped us out a little bit. He's now going to be part of the Corner 3. They're going to touch on all the college, Pitt, mostly all the college basketball around here, Duquesne, RMU. Maybe you're going to see several videos up here on the channel instead of just the one you were accustomed to. And, of course, NBA, even though we don't have a site that corresponds. We're going to talk NBA here in Pittsburgh, whether you like it or not. And I think more of you like it than you'll admit. But thanks again to the sponsors here, Beaver County Auto. Thanks again to SteelersNow.com, where this show will live. Make sure to follow all of us. Follow me here at Mike Asti 11, where the hate mail can go. You can slide my DMs and send me the hate mail if need be. But also we can maybe have intelligent discourse. I wouldn't mind that every now and then, but it sometimes does happen. At Mike Asti 11 there on Twitter. So we had a lot to discuss this week. This really could have been 2 shows. I wanted to get more action maybe with the chatters, as it's done well in recent weeks. Didn't get much here, but I don't know if it's a dead time here on a Wednesday night. Regardless, some of you were there. Thanks to you guys who were there. I'll remember that for the future, because I can make people prime chatters and get you in better position. Have you done a new show on WVU yet? Because I haven't got it. I didn't do a new show on WVU yet. But there are the other shows out there for WVU. I don't know about a new show this week. There's not much WVU news that's being generated, and I got a lot going on here in my life for this week. I cannot guarantee you a WVU show this week. But if you go through the channel, go through the mic drop section, you'll see WVU shows. I talked about WVU and the rivalry with Texas that is or isn't, and how that's really not a rivalry. Maybe you will disagree. Go to that show there. Talked about the expectations you should have on the team and Neil Brown's expectations in his first year. Did that prior to the season. kind of recapped each one of those weeks so far. And they lost, but maybe they play better. That's top 15 team, and that's a WVU team that I don't think even really might not even be bowl eligible, so we'll see. Talked about losing to Missouri, talked about the win over NC State. All those shows there, go to the Mic Drop section, Pittsburgh Sports Live. You'll find the West Virginia shows, or WVSportsNow.com, where you can find WVU-related shows as well. So hit up the family of networks. Hit up those especially because of the newest things we got going on. Hit up this here, SteelersNow.com. Find me on Twitter. More of these live chats coming up next week as we move through the Steelers season, and maybe it being the dawning of a Duck Dynasty in Pittsburgh, regardless of the future of Tomlin, regardless of what's going on with the emergence of Devin Bush, Chris Boswell kicking to perfection, T.J. Watt getting it done yet again, the miscues of Juju, the miscues of Connor, how they need to be criticized more for it, the issues around the receivers, the issues on offense, all of that being 1 and 4. Okay? And whether or not that can be salvaged with as bad as the division really is and how it's still kind of open with a weak schedule coming up, but we'll see. And nothing's guaranteed. With all of that said, get excited because it's a dawning of a new dynasty. The Duck Dynasty in Pittsburgh.